What if I told you that sometimes, even in the coldest corners of the justice system, something unexpected, something almost magical, happens? You've probably heard stories where the court slams down the gavel without a second thought, handing out years of punishment like it's just another Tuesday. But this time, the script flipped in a way no one saw coming. A single mother, already crushed by life's unforgiving weight, stood on the brink of losing everything, facing a brutal 15-year sentence with no parole in sight. You're about to witness how an emotional courtroom turned from a place of despair into a stage for one of the most human, jaw-dropping moments in legal history. Think judges are cold and robotic. Think again, this judge had a personal story, one that cracked through the usual stoic exterior and changed the fate of a family right there on the spot. And here's the thing. What unfolded next didn't just leave the room in tears. It sent a message of hope that reached far beyond those four walls. We're diving deep into a story of pain, struggle, redemption, and second chances. Get ready. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say, it's the kind of real-life twist that makes you believe in humanity all over again. Life wasn't supposed to turn out this way. Not for her. At just 32, this single mother found herself juggling 2 jobs, late-night shifts, and still coming up short on rent and groceries. Every morning, she'd kiss her kids goodbye with a brave face, hiding the gnawing fear that tomorrow might be the day their electricity gets cut, when survival feels like a full-time job. Decisions that once seemed unthinkable start feeling like the only option left on the table, and that's where desperation crept in like an unwanted guest. Faced with mounting bills and 2 hungry little mouths to feed, she made a choice. A non-violent crime that promised fast cash but carried life-altering consequences. It's easy to judge from the outside, isn't it? But let's be real. When the fridge is empty and eviction notices stack up like bad memories, logic and legality can get blurry. This wasn't about greed. It was about survival. Friends and neighbors whispered, but no one offered help. The isolation that often comes with being a single mother only intensified her loneliness. While other parents planned school bake sales, she was figuring out which bill to skip this month. And when she finally stood in that emotional courtroom, staring at the judge, reality hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her children's entire future. If you've ever wondered how people end up making split-second decisions that change their lives forever, this is it. Her story is not unique. Sadly, every day, countless single mothers walk this same tightrope, trying to balance survival with legality, and little did she know, the worst, yet strangely, also the most transformative, moment of her life was just around the corner. The air in the courtroom felt thick enough to cut with a knife. After weeks of emotional testimony, the single mother stood there, hands trembling, heart racing, barely holding it together. The judge's voice broke the heavy silence, delivering the blow no one was ready for. A 15-year sentence with no chance of parole anytime soon. 15 years. The words echoed off the walls like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Her knees buckled before the bailiff could even steady her. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with gasps of disbelief from onlookers. You could practically feel the collective heartbreak ripple through the emotional courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some spectators shook their heads in quiet sorrow. And there she was, a single mother, sentenced like a hardened criminal, even though her crime hadn't harmed a single soul physically. For anyone watching, it was impossible not to notice how the judge himself hesitated before reading the verdict. His face tightened. His words slowed. It was almost as if he felt the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't some textbook sentencing. This was personal, raw, and deeply emotional. The courtroom had turned from a place of law into a theater of human suffering, and just when it seemed like the gavel would slam down, sealing her fate for good, something unexpected stirred in the judge's eyes. A pause, a long, uncomfortable pause that no one could quite interpret. The energy in the room shifted, almost like the universe itself was holding its breath for what would come next. At the back of the emotional courtroom, 2 small voices suddenly broke through the tension, loud, raw, and full of pain. Her children, just 6 and 9 years old, couldn't hold it in anymore. The moment their mother's 15-year sentence was announced, they cried out for her like their world had just shattered. Their sobs weren't polite whimpers. They were gut-wrenching screams that left even the most seasoned court officers blinking back tears. You'd expect adults to handle these things with a stoic face, but kids, They don't know how to filter grief. One of them tried to run toward her, only to be gently held back by a family friend sitting nearby. The image of that moment, tiny outstretched arms, trembling lips, and tear-streaked faces, would haunt everyone in that room for a long time. Some reporters even put down their pens, unable to write through blurred vision. In a world obsessed with justice and punishment, we often forget the invisible victims left behind. These two children weren't just losing a parent. They were losing their emotional anchor, their bedtime storyteller, their safe place. Imagine being a child and hearing that your mom won't be home for birthdays, first days of school, or even high school graduation. It was heartbreak in its purest, most unfiltered form, and yet amid the cries and chaos, something subtle began to stir in the room. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Court officers exchanged glances. Even the judge found himself unable to look directly at the kids for more than a few seconds. No one knew it yet, but this emotional crack in the courtroom's armor was about to widen. And fast, just as the bailiff stepped forward to escort the single mother away, something unexpected happened. The judge, normally quick to close proceedings, raised his hand and asked everyone to remain seated. A collective gasp rippled through the emotional courtroom. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Lawyers exchanged puzzled glances, and the children's sobs softened as curious silence filled the room. People strained to hear what would come next. The judge cleared his throat, clearly battling some inner turmoil. With a slow, deliberate tone, he said there was something he needed to share before finalizing the 15-year sentence. It wasn't procedure, it wasn't scripted. This was raw humanity breaking through the rigid walls of the justice system. Even the court clerk, usually robotic in demeanor, looked up in surprise. A few folks in the back instinctively reached for their phones, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. This wasn't just another day in court. This was the kind of moment that makes headlines and history books, the kind of pause that leaves people holding their breath. The single mother, still trembling, turned toward the judge, confusion and a flicker of hope dancing behind her tears. Nobody knew what was coming next, but you could feel it. Something monumental was about to happen. The judge's voice wavered ever so slightly, his gaze shifting toward the courtroom ceiling, almost as if he needed to draw strength from somewhere higher, and in the next breath, he began telling a story no one expected, with the room still hanging in suspense. The judge took a long, shaky breath and began sharing something deeply personal. His voice, usually firm and commanding, now carried a softness that caught everyone off guard. He opened up about his own childhood, raised by a single mother who, like the woman before him, had been caught in a desperate situation. His words painted vivid images, late-night eviction notices, empty refrigerators, and the constant fear of losing everything. The emotional courtroom sat frozen as he described watching his mother struggle to keep their family afloat. He admitted that seeing the single mother standing before him had stirred memories he thought he'd buried long ago. There was a time, he said, when my mother sat in a courtroom just like this, facing a sentence that could have changed our lives forever. The room was silent, except for the occasional sniffle from people now openly wiping tears. The judge's honesty didn't just humanize him. It created a ripple effect of empathy. Defense attorneys, prosecutors, even courtroom security guards, people whose job it was to remain detached, felt the emotional walls crumbling around them. The judge explained how a second chance had saved his own family, turning despair into opportunity. It was a reminder that behind every case file lies a story most people never hear. By the time he finished speaking, the energy in the room had completely shifted. What had started as a rigid sentencing hearing now felt like a shared moment of human vulnerability. The judge's story wasn't just a revelation. It was a pivot point. People sensed that something unprecedented was about to unfold, and they weren't wrong. The judge leaned forward, resting his hands on the bench as if steadying himself for what he was about to do. Then, with a voice that cracked just slightly, he announced a decision that left the entire emotional courtroom in disbelief. He was suspending her 15-year sentence, effective immediately. Instead of prison, the single mother would enter a comprehensive rehabilitation program focused on counseling, job training, and family support services. You could almost hear the collective gasp echo through the room. This wasn't some light slap on the wrist or a get-out-of-jail-free card, the judge made it clear. This was her one and only unexpected second chance. She had to commit. Fully. No shortcuts, no excuses. But for a woman who'd been staring down a 15-year sentence just moments earlier, The alternative felt like a miracle wrapped in responsibility. Her tears of despair quickly shifted into tears of disbelief and hope. The rehabilitation program wasn't just about personal healing. It included parenting workshops, financial planning classes, and even mental health counseling. Things that could genuinely help her rebuild life for herself and her children. Programs like this aren't common, but when they work wonders. Cities like Chicago and Los Angeles have piloted similar initiatives with promising results, proving that people given real tools for change often take them and run. As the judge laid out the terms, his voice regained its usual firmness, but there was no mistaking the compassion behind every word. For the single mother, this was more than a suspended sentence. It was a lifeline thrown at the very moment she was drowning, and just as people were absorbing the shock of what had just happened, the courtroom's mood began shifting again, into something no one could have predicted for a few long seconds. The emotional courtroom stood still, like everyone was waiting for confirmation that they'd actually heard the judge right. Then it happened. A ripple effect unlike anything that room had witnessed before. First, a soft clap from the back row, followed by others joining in until the entire courtroom erupted into applause. Defense attorneys, prosecutors, even the usually stone-faced court officers stood up, wiping away tears and clapping like they were witnessing history. It wasn't just applause. It was a release of pent-up emotion, a rare moment where justice didn't feel cold and clinical, but deeply human and alive. Some people hugged, others pulled out tissues, dabbing their eyes in disbelief. Reporters dropped their professional detachment and just sat there shaking their heads, amazed at what had just unfolded. The suspended sentence wasn't just a decision. It felt like a collective victory for compassion in the middle of it all. The single mother stood frozen, still processing her unexpected second chance. Her children, still sniffling from their earlier heartbreak, watched as strangers showed support for their family. The judge sat back, allowing the room to breathe, almost like he knew people needed this emotional release. It's funny how one choice, one moment can reset the tone of an entire space, and that's exactly what happened here. But if people thought the moment couldn't get any more heart-tugging, they were about to be proven wrong, because what happened next would take the emotional temperature of the room to an entirely new level. Before anyone could fully process the applause, the single mother's two children broke free from their seats and ran straight toward her. It was like watching a scene straight out of a movie, only this wasn't scripted. It was raw, unscripted, and overwhelmingly real. The kids clung to her with all the force their little arms could muster, their tear-streaked faces buried in her neck. The emotional courtroom, already charged, erupted into more sobs and cheers. Even people who had spent decades in that courthouse admitted later they'd never seen anything like it. Court officers, usually tasked with maintaining order, stood by with soft smiles and misty eyes. One prosecutor, known for being particularly tough, turned away discreetly to wipe his face. This wasn't just a family reunion. It was a testament to the power of compassion, mercy, and the unexpected second chance that had just been delivered. The single mother kissed the tops of her children's heads over and over, whispering words of comfort and promises of change. She wasn't just hugging her kids. She was clinging to hope, redemption, and the realization that she'd just been handed a future she thought had been lost moments ago. You could feel the emotional weight lifting in the room, replaced by something rare inside a courtroom. Genuine joy. And as the family stood together in that tearful reunion, the judge gently cleared his throat once more, signaling that there was still one final thing left to say before this unforgettable hearing would come to an end. Still holding her children close, the single mother slowly stood upright, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. The emotional courtroom quieted again as she turned to face the judge. Her voice trembled at first but gained strength with every word she promised. Right there in front of the judge, the lawyers, the court officers, and every stranger in that room, that she would turn her life around, not just for herself, but for her children, and for everyone who believed she was worth this unexpected second chance. She spoke about the darkness she'd felt, the nights spent staring at her ceiling, wondering how she'd ever escape the cycle of poverty and hopelessness. She admitted her mistakes without sugarcoating them, but she also shared her determination to take full advantage of the rehabilitation program. Counseling and job training being offered to her. The sincerity in her voice left no room for doubt. This was a woman who meant every single word. As she looked back at her kids, she made another vow, to be there for every birthday, every school recital, every scraped knee and late-night nightmare. She wanted to rebuild trust, reshape their lives, and show them what resilience looked like in action. There wasn't a dry eye in sight. Even seasoned journalists used to covering hard criminal cases scribbled furiously to capture every word of this unexpected promise. The judge nodded, giving her a look that said, "Now go prove it." And just when people thought this emotional courtroom roller coaster was over, the judge stood up one last time, preparing to leave everyone with a final message no one would forget. The judge stood, adjusting his robe with a slow, thoughtful gesture. The emotional courtroom fell silent once more, everyone leaning in, waiting for what would surely be the final words of this unforgettable day. With a steady voice, he delivered a powerful statement about compassion, second chances, and the importance of seeing people as more than the worst mistake they've ever made. He spoke about the justice system needing not just law, but heart. He reminded everyone that behind every criminal charge is a human story. A single mother who stumbled under the weight of survival, two innocent children who almost lost their emotional anchor, and a community that now had the chance to help rewrite a story that could have ended very differently. The judge's words weren't just directed at her. They were for everyone in that room, and in truth, anyone listening to this story now. The judge talked about how his own life had changed because someone once showed compassion to his family. "Sometimes," he said, looking straight at the woman and her children, "the greatest punishments come not from confinement, but from the burden of knowing you were given a rare chance, and you owe it to everyone who believed in you to make it count." The weight of that message lingered in the air long after he finished. As he finally banged the gavel to officially close the session, people didn't just leave the courtroom. They left with a renewed belief in redemption, community, and hope. And somewhere deep inside, many walked out knowing this wasn't just a legal case. This was a life lesson, unfolding in real time, that would stick with them forever. So now the real question is, what's stopping you from embracing your own second chance? This story wasn't just about one single mother or one emotional courtroom. It was about how quickly life can pivot when compassion steps in. How many times have you written yourself off, told yourself there's no coming back from a bad decision, a failure, or a rock-bottom moment? Here's the truth. Every one of us is one decision, one opportunity, one unexpected twist away from rewriting our story. Whether you're battling your own version of a 15-year sentence, be it emotional, financial, or personal, the key is recognizing that hope is always closer than it seems. Are you ready to stop seeing your circumstances as a life sentence and start seeing them as the beginning of your rehabilitation program? What would happen if today you decided to fight for your own tearful reunion with your dreams, your self-worth, your future? I challenge you right now. Drop a comment below. Tell me your biggest life struggle and what kind of second chance you're ready to create for yourself. Let's build a community that believes in redemption, for others and for ourselves. And hey, if you felt even 1 ounce of hope or inspiration from this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful, real-life story that just might change the way you see the world and yourself.